What happens when office politics meets a $50 million deal? Sometimes karma works faster than you think. If you're here for workplace justice stories that'll make you cheer, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love connecting with listeners around the world. I never thought my Mont Blanc pen would become the star witness to my own professional execution. The pen was a gift from Robert Kellerman when I'd hit my 5-year mark at Meridian Solutions. Custom engraved with the company logo, it had signed dozens of contracts worth millions. That Tuesday afternoon in September, I held it steady as I made the final edits to the Chen Industries agreement. $50 million worth of manufacturing software that would transform their entire operation. The golden September light slanted through the conference room windows on the 34th floor, painting everything in warm honey tones. I could smell my coffee growing cold as I concentrated on the details. Marcus Chen's team had been meticulous, and after 6 months of negotiations, we were finally there. 3 signatures away from the biggest deal in Meridian's history. Sarah, Victoria Ashworth's voice cut through my concentration like ice water. Conference room B now. I looked up to see my boss standing in the doorway, her Chanel No. 5 announcing her presence before her Harvard MBA credentials ever could. Everything about Victoria screamed expensive. The Hermes bag, the perfectly blown-out blonde hair, the suit that cost more than most people's rent. She'd been hired 18 months ago as VP of Business Development, brought in to elevate our client relationships, as Robert had explained it. What that really meant was bringing Ivy League polish to a company built by state school graduates like me. Let me just finish this clause. Now, Sarah. The way she said my name made my stomach clench. I capped the Mont Blanc and followed her down the hall, past the curious glances of my colleagues. The elevator ding echoed ominously as we descended 2 floors. Conference room B was smaller, windowless, fluorescent lighting harsh against beige walls. Victoria's assistant, Jennifer, sat with a manila folder and an expression that screamed, "I'm just following orders." The smell of industrial carpet cleaner hung in the air. "Sit down." Victoria didn't sit herself. Instead, she positioned herself behind the chair opposite mine, hands resting on its back like she was addressing a board meeting. As part of our strategic realignment, we're making some difficult decisions about personnel optimization. Each word was crisp, rehearsed. Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately. The words hit like a physical blow. My mouth went dry. I'm sorry, what? This is nothing personal, Sarah. It's about elevating our credentials and ensuring we have the right people interfacing with our highest value clients. I stared at her. The Chen deal closes Thursday. I've been working this account for 6 years. Marcus specifically requested, I'll be taking over the Chen relationship going forward. Victoria's smile was sharp as broken glass. They'll understand that we're committed to providing them with senior-level attention. My hands trembled slightly as I processed this. 6 years of relationship building, late nights reviewing technical specifications, learning Marcus's communication style, his company's culture, his vision for the future. And Victoria thought she could waltz in and take over because she had an MBA from the right zip code. You can't be serious. Marcus has never even met you. The deal is 3 days from closing. Marcus Chen will adapt. Our clients appreciate working with executives who understand strategic vision. Victoria's tone suggested I was a child who didn't understand adult decisions. Jennifer has prepared your separation agreement. You'll receive 2 weeks severance plus accumulated vacation time. 2 weeks. After 8 years with the company. Jennifer slid the papers across the table. The sound of paper against laminate seemed unnaturally loud. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears as I scanned the legal language. Standard, non-compete, confidentiality agreements, the whole corporate farewell package designed to make this as painless as possible for everyone except me. I need time to review this with, there's really nothing to review. Sign here, here, and here. Victoria tapped the signature lines with her perfectly manicured nail. Security will escort you to collect your personal items. We'll have everything boxed and ready within the hour. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I could taste copper in my mouth. Stress, I realized. My father had always said I bit my tongue when I was angry. Old habit from childhood, from being the daughter who never quite measured up to her flashy older brother with his sports trophies and easy charm. This is goodbye, then. I said it quietly, more to myself than to her. This is goodbye, Victoria confirmed, and I swear I heard satisfaction in her voice. I didn't sign. Not yet. Instead, I looked directly at Victoria, noting the way she couldn't quite meet my eyes, the slight flush creeping up her neck despite her composed exterior. I'll need until tomorrow morning to have my attorney review this. That's acceptable. But understand, Sarah, the decision is final. This is simply a matter of processing the paperwork correctly. As I left that sterile conference room, walking past Jennifer's apologetic smile and Victoria's barely concealed triumph, I felt something shift inside me. The Mont Blanc pen in my jacket pocket seemed heavier than it should, weighted with 8 years of loyalty that apparently meant nothing to the people who mattered. The elevator doors closed, and for the first time in my adult life, I had no idea what came next. I spent that night pacing my Lincoln Park townhouse, the separation agreement spread across my kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. The morning coffee steamed in my favorite ceramic mug, the one with the chip on the handle that I'd refused to replace for 3 years. Some things become precious precisely because they're imperfect. My home office had always been my sanctuary. Converted from a spare bedroom, it held my real treasures. Client files organized by year, industry reports I'd annotated by hand, thank you notes from satisfied customers. The walls were painted a warm sage green, nothing like the corporate beige that dominated Meridian's offices. This was where I did my best thinking. But this morning, even my sanctuary felt contaminated by Victoria's words. Elevating our credentials. The phrase made my skin crawl. I called my attorney first. Janet Wu had handled my mortgage and will. Steady work for steady people. Her voice was professionally concerned as I explained the situation. 2 weeks severance after 8 years? That's insulting but unfortunately legal. The non-compete is standard. You can't contact Meridian clients for 6 months. Papers rustled on her end. But Sarah, something about this feels targeted. Have you documented any performance issues? Complaints about your work? None. My last review was exceptional. I've never had a single client complaint. Then why fire you 3 days before your biggest deal closes? It makes no business sense. That's when it hit me. I pulled out my laptop and started digging through my email archives. If Victoria had been building a case against me, there would be traces. Corporate environments are nothing if not documented. What I found made my blood run cold. 3 months ago, Victoria had started CCing herself on my client communications. Subtle at first, just the high-level strategy emails, then more frequently. Last month, she'd requested copies of all my client files for strategic planning purposes. 2 weeks ago, she'd scheduled her own call with Marcus Chen's procurement team, citing executive alignment. She'd been systematically inserting herself into my accounts. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. This is Marcus Chen. Can you call me? We need to talk about Thursday's signing. My hands trembled as I dialed. Marcus answered on the first ring. Sarah, thank God. What the hell is happening over there? What do you mean? Victoria Ashworth called me yesterday. Said she's taking over our account because you're transitioning to other opportunities. But here's the thing. I never authorized a relationship change. My contract specifically names you as our primary contact. I closed my eyes. Of course it did. I'd insisted on that clause after a previous vendor had switched account managers mid-project without notice. Marcus, I need to tell you something. I was terminated yesterday. Silence. Then, they fired you? 3 days before we close? Victoria said you'd understand about strategic vision and working with senior executives. Marcus's laugh was sharp, bitter. Strategic vision? Sarah, do you know why I insisted on working with you? Because you're the only person at that company who understands our actual business. Victoria spent our entire call yesterday talking about synergistic solutions and enterprise-level paradigms. It was like listening to a business school textbook having a nervous breakdown. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. She does love her buzzwords. Here's what she doesn't know. I've been having second thoughts about this deal for weeks. Not because of you, but because of the direction Meridian seems to be heading. Too much corporate speak, not enough substance. Yesterday's call confirmed my worst fears. My heart started racing. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe it's time for a conversation. Not about the Meridian deal. That's probably dead now. But about what comes next. For both of us. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, watching the September breeze stir the trees outside my window. The warm air carried the scent of changing seasons, that particular autumn smell of possibility and endings intertwined. Then I did something that surprised even me. I opened my laptop and started typing an email to Robert Kellerman. Robert, I need to speak with you about Victoria and what happened yesterday. I think there are things you should know about how this termination was handled. Can we meet for coffee this afternoon? Sarah. His response came within minutes. My office, 2 p.m. And Sarah? I'm sorry. The apology hit harder than Victoria's dismissal had. Robert had been my mentor, the one who'd believed in me when others saw just another state school graduate without the right connections. If he was apologizing, it meant he'd known this was coming. The question was, how much had he known, and why hadn't he stopped it? I spent the afternoon preparing, not just for the conversation with Robert, but for whatever came next. I printed copies of every client appreciation letter I'd received, every successful deal I'd closed, every innovation I'd brought to the company. If this was war, I was going to fight it with facts. But first, I had a more immediate problem. Victoria would be meeting with Marcus Chen tomorrow, expecting to close a $50 million deal with a client who was already having second thoughts. A client who'd specifically asked for me and gotten corporate doublespeak instead. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The Mont Blanc pen sat on my desk, next to the unsigned separation agreement. 8 years of service, reduced to legal boilerplate. But maybe that pen had one more signature left in it. Maybe it was time to write my own ending to this story. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a LinkedIn notification. Someone had endorsed me for client relationship management and strategic business development. When I checked, I saw it was Marcus Chen, and he'd made it public. Sarah Mitchell is the gold standard for client service. Her departure from Meridian Solutions is their loss, and someone else's incredible gain. Any company smart enough to hire her just won the lottery. Within an hour, 3 former colleagues had shared it. Then 5 more. By evening, my phone was buzzing with messages from recruiters, former clients, and industry contacts I hadn't heard from in years. Victoria's plan to quietly eliminate me was about to become very, very public. I poured myself a glass of wine and started planning. If she wanted to play corporate politics with my career, she was about to learn that 20 years in business had taught me a few things about strategy too. Starting with this. Never underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose. Robert's office smelled like old leather and regret. I'd been there hundreds of times over the years, but that Wednesday afternoon, everything felt different. The familiar burgundy chair where I'd received promotions and praise now felt like the defendant's seat in a courtroom. He looked older than his 63 years. Silver hair mussed like he'd been running his hands through it. The reading glasses perched on his nose were new, another sign that time was catching up with all of us. Behind him, Lake Michigan stretched gray-blue toward the horizon, September clouds gathering for an afternoon storm. Sarah, sit, please. His voice carried the weight of difficult conversations. I owe you an explanation. I remained standing, arms crossed. The separation agreement was folded in my jacket pocket, still unsigned. An explanation for what, exactly? For letting Victoria destroy 8 years of loyalty in a windowless conference room? Or for knowing about it beforehand and saying nothing? Robert winced. Both, I suppose. He gestured toward the sideboard where he kept a bottle of Macallan. Drink? It's 2 in the afternoon. Trust me, you'll want one for this conversation. Something in his tone made me reconsider. I took my usual seat, the burgundy chair that now felt like a throne I'd been exiled from, and accepted the crystal tumbler. The whiskey burned, but it was a clean burn, honest in a way the corporate world hadn't been. "Victoria came to me 6 weeks ago," Robert began, settling behind his mahogany desk. "Said she'd been reviewing the client portfolios and found some irregularities in your account management." My grip tightened on the glass. "What kind of irregularities?" "Unauthorized contact with clients outside normal business hours, personal relationships that blurred professional boundaries. She had documentation, email timestamps, phone records, even photos from client events where you appeared to be overly familiar." The accusation hit like a slap. "Overly familiar?" "Robert, you taught me that relationships matter in this business. You said the client who trusts you personally will forgive professional mistakes, but never the reverse. I know what I taught you." His voice was barely above a whisper. "And I know Victoria twisted it into something ugly, but she presented it as a liability issue. Said Marcus Chen's relationship with you was unprofessional, that he'd specifically requested you handle negotiations because of personal favoritism rather than business merit." I stared at him, pieces clicking into place. "And you believed her?" "I wanted to investigate further, but Victoria pressed for immediate action. Said Chen's company was conducting their own internal review of vendor relationships, looking for any impropriety. If they found evidence of personal favoritism, they'd cancel the contract," I finished, "and possibly sue for breach of professional conduct." Robert nodded miserably. "She made it sound like terminating you was the only way to save the deal. I thought I was protecting you from something worse." The room fell silent except for the tick of Robert's grandfather clock, a gift from his mentor 30 years ago. I recognized the parallel. The trusted advisor, manipulating fear to achieve their own ends. "Robert, did you actually verify any of Victoria's claims?" He looked down at his hands. "She said she'd already spoken to legal, had them review everything. I trusted her due diligence." "Of course you did." I set down my glass harder than necessary. "Because she has the right credentials. Harvard MBA trumps relationships and institutional knowledge every time. That's not fair, Sarah. Isn't it?" I leaned forward. "Tell me, when did you stop trusting your own judgment about people? When did you decide that a degree from the right school mattered more than 8 years of results?" Robert was quiet for a long moment, studying the amber liquid in his glass. Outside, the first drops of rain began to streak the windows. When the board started asking questions about our competitive positioning, when younger companies with Ivy League leadership started winning contracts we'd held for years, when I realized that maybe I was becoming obsolete, the honesty in his voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the confident mentor who'd guided my career. This was a man afraid of being left behind by a world that increasingly valued pedigree over performance. "So you hired Victoria to modernize our image." "I hired Victoria because she convinced me she could elevate our client relationships, take us from a regional player to a national presence." He laughed bitterly. "She had references from McKinsey, testimonials from Fortune 500 CEOs. Her previous company had doubled their revenue in 18 months under her leadership." Something cold settled in my stomach. "What previous company?" Robert's expression shifted. "Hartwell and Associates, boutique consulting firm in Boston." "Why?" I pulled out my phone and started typing. "Because Marcus Chen mentioned something yesterday about companies that prioritize style over substance, and because Victoria's been systematically taking over my client relationships for months." The search results loaded, and my blood chilled. "Robert, Hartwell and Associates filed for bankruptcy 8 months ago." "That's impossible. Victoria's references were from clients who left when she did." I kept reading, my voice growing steadier with each revelation. "Look at this. Former Hartwell VP Victoria Ashworth allegedly poached key accounts before departing for a Chicago-based firm. There's a lawsuit pending." Robert's face went white. "Show me." I handed him my phone, watching as he scrolled through the articles. His hands shook slightly as he read. The clients she claimed to have secured for Hartwell? They all followed her to her next position, leaving Hartwell unable to meet their financial obligations. I felt a grim satisfaction in stating the facts. She didn't double their revenue, Robert. She hollowed them out from the inside. The grandfather clock chimed 3 times. Robert set down my phone and reached for his desk drawer, pulling out a manila folder. I had our investigators run a deeper background check after you were terminated, he said quietly. It arrived this morning. He slid the folder across the desk. Inside were employment records, legal documents, and a pattern that made my stomach turn. Victoria had worked for 4 companies in the past 6 years. Each had experienced significant client losses within months of her departure. She's done this before, I whispered. The Chen account was never about elevating our credentials, Robert said. She needed a big win to establish credibility here before implementing the same strategy that worked at her previous positions. I closed the folder, my mind racing. Which means firing me was just the beginning. She's planning to take our biggest clients with her when she leaves. And I handed her the keys to the kingdom. Robert's voice was hollow. Sarah, I am so sorry. I let my own insecurities cloud my judgment about someone I've known and trusted for 8 years. The rain was coming harder now, drumming against the windows like an impatient client waiting for answers. I thought about Marcus Chen's call, his growing doubts about Meridian's direction, about Victoria preparing to meet with him tomorrow, armed with my relationship building and his trust. There's something else, Robert continued. Victoria doesn't know about the background check yet. And she doesn't know that Marcus specifically requested you in the contract language. I looked up sharply. What do you mean? The Chen contract includes a key personnel clause. If you're not available to manage the account, they have the right to terminate within 30 days without penalty. The implications hit me like lightning. She's walking into that meeting tomorrow thinking she's securing a $50 million deal. But the contract she's trying to close is legally void the moment Marcus finds out I'm no longer with the company, unless she can convince him to waive the clause. With her buzzwords and strategic vision, I almost laughed. Marcus told me yesterday that talking to her was like listening to a business textbook having a nervous breakdown. Robert stood and walked to the window, watching the storm build over the lake. Sarah, I know I have no right to ask this after what I've done, but I need your help to minimize the damage to this company, to the people who work here. I joined him at the window, both of us reflected in the rain-streaked glass like ghosts of our former professional relationship. What are you asking exactly? Victoria's meeting with Marcus tomorrow at 10. The signing was scheduled for 2. If the deal collapses, he trailed off. The company stock takes a hit. Layoffs become inevitable. And everyone who trusted you to make the right decisions pays the price for your mistake. Yes. I thought about my colleagues still working on the 34th floor, unaware that their jobs hung in the balance of tomorrow's meeting. Jennifer, Victoria's assistant, who'd looked so uncomfortable yesterday. The junior analysts who'd learned from me over the years. They didn't deserve to suffer for Victoria's ambitions or Robert's insecurities. I want my job back, I said finally. Full reinstatement. Public acknowledgement that my termination was based on false information. And I want Victoria gone. Not just from the Chen account, but from the company. Robert nodded slowly. Done. All of it. And Robert? Next time someone tries to convince you that credentials matter more than character, remember this conversation. He met my eyes in the window's reflection. I will. I promise. I pulled the separation agreement from my pocket and tore it in half. The sound was surprisingly satisfying. Now, I said, checking my watch, I have a phone call to make to Marcus Chen. It's time he learned the truth about strategic vision. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crisp September air that makes Chicago feel like the center of the universe. I dressed carefully. My navy Tahari suit, the one that made me feel invincible during difficult negotiations. The Mont Blanc pen went into my jacket pocket, a talisman of sorts. Today, it would witness either Victoria's triumph or her downfall. Marcus and I had spoken the night before. Our conversation had been illuminating. Sarah, I need you to know something, he'd said. The only reason I agreed to work with Meridian was because of you. Your reputation in the industry is gold. When Victoria called yesterday talking about paradigm shifts and enterprise solutions, it was like watching someone try to sell me a car by describing the color of the paint. I'd filled him in on everything. Victoria's pattern of company destruction, the false accusations against me, the systematic takeover of my accounts. His response had been swift and decisive. Here's what we're going to do. Now, At 9:45 a.m., I stood outside Conference Room A on the 34th floor, watching through the glass walls as Victoria prepared for what she thought would be her moment of triumph. She'd arranged the room like a stage set, leather portfolios positioned just so, bottled water at precise intervals. Her laptop open to what I could see was a PowerPoint presentation titled Strategic Partnership Evolution. She wore her armor too, a charcoal Armani suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her blonde hair swept into a power chignon that added 2 inches to her height. The woman understood visual presentation. I had to give her that. Marcus arrived at exactly 10 o'clock, flanked by his CFO Linda Park and their head of operations, David Kim. I knew them both well. Linda had a weakness for Chicago deep dish pizza despite her New York roots, and David collected vintage watches. Victoria had never bothered to learn such details. She greeted them with the kind of confident smile reserved for deals already won. Through the glass, I could see her gesturing toward the presentation screen, her mouth moving in what I recognized as her strategic vision speech. Marcus nodded politely, his expression neutral in the way that meant he was already making mental notes. 15 minutes in, Victoria's confidence was still intact. She was deep into slide 12. I could see the bullet points about synergistic value propositions from my position in the hallway. Marcus glanced at his watch. Linda was taking notes, but her expression suggested skepticism rather than enthusiasm. Then Marcus asked a question. I couldn't hear it, but I saw Victoria's micro-pause, the slight tightening around her eyes that meant she was improvising an answer to something she hadn't prepared for. Her hand gestured toward documents that weren't there. My documents. The client research files that Victoria had never seen because she'd been too busy positioning herself to actually learn the business. At 10:23, Marcus stood up. Not the casual stretch of someone getting comfortable, but the decisive movement of someone preparing to leave. Victoria's smile faltered. She gestured more frantically now, pulling up new slides, shuffling through papers. That's when Marcus delivered the line we'd rehearsed. Ms. Ashworth, I appreciate your time, but I have some concerns about continuity of service. Our contract specifically names Sarah Mitchell as the primary relationship manager. I understand she's no longer with your team. Even through the glass walls, I could see the blood drain from Victoria's face. This wasn't in her script. She hadn't expected Marcus to know about my termination, let alone care about it. I watched her recover. Credit where due, the woman had reflexes. Her posture straightened, her smile returned, and she launched into what I recognized as damage control mode, probably explaining how my departure was part of a strategic realignment, how senior leadership would provide enhanced service delivery. Marcus let her talk. Linda and David exchanged glances. At 10:31, Marcus pulled out his phone and placed it on the conference table. Speakerphone. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see Victoria's expression shift from confident to confused to something approaching panic, because Marcus was calling me. My phone buzzed right on schedule. I answered from my position in the hallway, making sure my voice would carry clearly through the conference room's audio system. Marcus, good morning. I assume Victoria has explained the situation? She's explained her perspective, Marcus replied diplomatically. But I'd like to hear from you directly. Are you still employed by Meridian Solutions? As of this morning, yes. I've been fully reinstated following a review of the circumstances surrounding my temporary departure. It appears there were some misunderstandings about my client relationships and professional conduct. Victoria was on her feet now, gesturing frantically. I could see her mouth moving, probably trying to interrupt or end the call. But Marcus held up a hand, his attention focused on the phone. Sarah, I need to ask directly. Do you believe Meridian Solutions can deliver on the commitments outlined in our agreement? This was the moment of truth. I could destroy Victoria completely with a single sentence. Tell Marcus about her history of client poaching, her pattern of corporate destruction, her plans to hollow out Meridian from the inside. It would end her career and probably save the company, but it would also make me exactly like her, someone who used personal destruction as a business strategy. Marcus, I believe Meridian has the capability to deliver exceptional service when we have the right team in place. However, I think we need to have an honest conversation about leadership structure and account management going forward. I agree completely. Would you be available for lunch today? Just you and me? Absolutely. Shall we say the signature room at 1? Perfect. I'll see you there. The call ended. Through the glass, I watched Victoria sink into her chair like a deflated balloon. The PowerPoint still glowed on the wall. Strategic Partnership Evolution. But the evolution she'd planned was clearly not the one taking place. Marcus stood and addressed Victoria directly. I couldn't hear his words, but his body language was clear, polite, professional, and final. He shook her hand, nodded to Linda and David, and walked toward the conference room door. He paused when he saw me in the hallway. "Sarah, good to see you back where you belong." "Good to be back, Marcus." After he left, I remained in the hallway for another moment, watching Victoria through the glass. She sat alone at the conference table, surrounded by her carefully arranged props and her worthless presentation. Her Hermes bag sat unopened beside her, her laptop screen still glowing with promises she couldn't deliver. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt something I hadn't expected: pity. Victoria Ashworth was brilliant at corporate theater, masterful at manipulating insecurities and fears. But she'd never learned the most fundamental lesson of business relationships. Authenticity cannot be faked, and trust, once lost, is nearly impossible to rebuild. She looked up then and saw me watching her. Our eyes met through the glass. The woman who'd tried to destroy my career, and the woman who now held her future in her hands. I nodded once, acknowledgement of shared understanding. Then I turned and walked away, leaving her alone with the consequences of her choices. Stick around, because this story has more twists than a corporate merger. My phone was already buzzing with text messages. 3 were from colleagues who'd heard about the morning's meeting. 2 were from recruiters who'd seen Marcus's LinkedIn endorsement. 1 was from Robert, asking if we could meet before my lunch with Marcus. But the most interesting message was from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Please." Victoria Ashworth, asking for help from the woman she'd tried to eliminate. The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. I checked my watch. 11:15. Plenty of time before lunch with Marcus. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for Victoria and me to have an honest conversation about what happens when ambition collides with integrity. After all, even corporate predators deserve a chance at redemption. The question was, did Victoria want to be redeemed, or was this just another strategic maneuver? There was only one way to find out. I found Victoria in the building's lobby cafe, hunched over a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold an hour ago. She'd shed the Armani armor for dark jeans and a simple sweater, the first time I'd ever seen her dressed like a normal person instead of a corporate warrior. Her carefully styled hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and there were actual tears streaking her makeup. She looked up when I approached, and I saw something I'd never expected to see in Victoria Ashworth's eyes: genuine fear. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I wasn't sure you would." I slid into the chair across from her, noting how she flinched when I set my coffee cup on the marble table. The lobby buzzed with the usual corporate energy, people rushing between meetings, phones buzzing, the familiar symphony of ambition in motion. But our corner table felt isolated, like a confessional booth in the middle of a cathedral. "Why am I here, Victoria?" She stared down at her hands, perfectly manicured nails now chipped at the edges. "Because I'm about to lose everything, and you're the only person who might understand why I did what I did. Try me." Victoria took a shaky breath. "My father was a janitor at Harvard Business School. Every night after classes ended, he'd clean the lecture halls where future CEOs learned to run the world. I grew up hearing about those students, their confidence, their connections, their assumption that success was their birthright." She paused, collecting herself. "When I got accepted to Harvard on scholarship, I thought I'd made it. I thought having that degree would be enough, but it wasn't. I was still the janitor's daughter pretending to belong at the table." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation. But the Victoria sitting across from me bore little resemblance to the polished executive who'd destroyed my career 48 hours ago. This woman looked broken. So you decided to fake it until you made it? I decided to become indispensable by making myself the solution to problems I'd created. Her laugh was bitter. At Hartwell, I identified their biggest vulnerability: client retention. Then I systematically made it worse by questioning existing relationships, suggesting that our competition was gaining ground because we weren't prestigious enough. The pattern was becoming clear. You created the crisis so you could be the hero who solved it. Exactly. I convinced management that I could secure better clients, more sophisticated accounts. When I left, I took those relationships with me. Hartwell collapsed, but I looked like the visionary who'd seen the writing on the wall. Victoria pulled out her phone and showed me a news article dated 2 weeks ago. Hartwell's former employees have been filing lawsuits, wrongful termination, fraudulent business practices. My name is mentioned in every single filing. I read the headline: Former executive faces federal investigation for client manipulation scheme. The article detailed a pattern spanning multiple companies, millions in lost revenue, and a federal task force investigating corporate fraud. They're going to arrest me, Sarah. The FBI contacted my attorney yesterday. They want to interview me about Hartwell, about Patterson and Associates before that, about the consulting firm in Denver that went under 3 years ago. My coffee had gone cold while she talked. Victoria, what exactly are you asking me to do? I need Marcus Chen to complete the deal. Not for Meridian. For me. If this contract falls through, it proves the FBI's theory that I destroy companies from within. But if it succeeds, it gives you cover, makes you look like a legitimate executive instead of a corporate con artist. She nodded miserably. I know how it sounds. I know what I did to you was unconscionable. But Sarah, if this deal collapses, it won't just destroy me. The entire Chicago tech sector will be under scrutiny. Every executive who's ever changed companies will be suspect. I leaned back in my chair, processing the magnitude of what she was telling me. Victoria wasn't just a corporate climber willing to step on others to reach the top. She was a serial company killer, and the FBI was closing in. Why should I help you? Because despite everything I've done, I never lied about your competence. You're the best account manager I've ever seen. You build relationships that outlast companies, outlast careers. What I did to you was born from envy, not malice. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and went even paler. My attorney. The FBI wants to meet tomorrow. I thought about Marcus, waiting for our lunch meeting in an hour. About Robert, who'd been manipulated by his own insecurities. About my colleagues on the 34th floor, working for a company that might become collateral damage in a federal investigation. Victoria, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Can Meridian actually deliver on the Chen contract without you sabotaging it? Yes. Her response was immediate. The company has excellent capabilities. Robert's team is solid. The technical infrastructure is sound. The only variable was whether Marcus would trust the transition. And now that I'm back? Now you can deliver everything he needs and more. Victoria's smile was sad. I always knew you were the real asset, Sarah. That's why I had to get rid of you before implementing my exit strategy. The honesty was staggering. She'd just admitted to planning Meridian's destruction from the moment she was hired. What's your exit strategy now? Victoria pulled an envelope from her purse. My resignation letter, effective immediately. Personal reasons, family obligations, the usual corporate euphemisms for running before the FBI catches up. I opened the letter. It was professionally written, gracious even. No mention of federal investigations or fraudulent schemes. Just a talented executive moving on to new opportunities. You're just going to disappear? I'm going to turn myself in. The words hung in the air between us like a confession in church. My attorney thinks if I cooperate fully, provide evidence about the other companies, I might avoid serious jail time. And you want me to what? Tell Marcus the deal is safe because you're no longer involved? I want you to tell Marcus the truth, that Meridian Solutions is a good company that made a bad hire, that you can deliver on every commitment in that contract, that my departure removes any liability concerns about leadership instability. She was asking me to save the company she'd planned to destroy, to protect the colleagues she'd been willing to sacrifice for her own advancement. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Victoria, why didn't you just build something real? You clearly have the intelligence, the education, the skills. Why the elaborate schemes? Because real success takes time, and I was always running from something. My background, my father's expectations, the fear that someone would discover I didn't really belong. She wiped her eyes with a napkin. By the time I realized that belonging isn't something you fake, it was too late. The lies had their own momentum. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Running a few minutes late. Still on for 1:15? I looked at Victoria, really looked at her. Stripped of her corporate persona, she was just a scared woman who'd confused credentials with character, who'd let ambition poison her integrity until she couldn't tell the difference between success and survival. I'll tell Marcus that Meridian remains fully committed to the partnership, I said finally. I'll make sure the contract closes on schedule. But Victoria? She looked up hopefully. After today, we're done. I'm not your friend, I'm not your ally, and I'm not your redemption story. I'm doing this for Robert, for my colleagues, and for Marcus. Not for you. Victoria nodded, understanding the boundaries I was setting. Thank you, Sarah. For everything. She stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, watching you these past few days has reminded me what actual competence looks like. What I should have been building instead of what I was destroying. After she left, I sat alone in the lobby cafe, surrounded by the ambient noise of corporate life continuing around me. In my pocket, the Mont Blanc pen felt warm against my hand, ready to sign the contract that would save not just a deal, but an entire company's future. Victoria Ashworth had tried to destroy my career, but in the end, she'd given me something more valuable. The absolute certainty that my worth wasn't determined by anyone else's recognition. Now it was time to prove it. The signature room on the 95th floor offered a view that made Chicago's problems look manageable from 30,000 feet up. Lake Michigan stretched endlessly eastward, September sunlight dancing on the water like scattered diamonds. Marcus was already seated at our usual table, the one by the northeast window where we'd hammered out the technical specifications for his manufacturing software 6 months ago. He stood when I approached, and I noticed something different about his demeanor. Less corporate formality, more genuine warmth, like we were friends meeting for lunch instead of vendor and client navigating a crisis. Sarah, he pulled out my chair. You look remarkably composed for someone who's had quite a week. Clean living and good coffee, I replied, settling into the burgundy leather seat. The familiar weight of the Mont Blanc pen in my jacket pocket felt reassuring, plus the satisfaction of watching karma work faster than usual. Marcus laughed. Not the polite chuckle of professional courtesy, but genuine amusement. I have to admit, Victoria's presentation this morning was educational. I've never seen someone use so many buzzwords to say absolutely nothing. She has a gift for corporate theater. Unfortunately, she's been using it to hollow out companies from the inside for years. The server approached, Jennifer, who remembered that Marcus preferred sparkling water with lime, and that I always ordered the salmon. Small details that Victoria had never bothered to learn because she was too busy positioning herself for the next strategic maneuver. Before we discuss business, Marcus said after Jennifer left, I need to tell you something. The reason I insisted on working with you specifically wasn't just professional admiration. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? 3 years ago, you handled the integration project for my previous company. Remember data flow systems? I nodded. The warehouse management software. You were VP of operations then. Right. But what you don't know is that project saved my career. Our previous vendor had delivered a system that was completely inadequate. Crashes every few hours, data corruption issues, the works. The board was ready to fire me for recommending them. Marcus paused as our drinks arrived, gathering his thoughts. You could have pushed for a complete system replacement. Bigger contract for Meridian, more commission for you. Instead, you spent 3 months reverse engineering the failed system and building bridge software that made it functional. You saved Dataflow $2 million and my reputation. The memory came flooding back. Marcus had been under tremendous pressure, working 18-hour days trying to make sense of a vendor's promises that had turned to smoke. I'd seen the exhaustion in his eyes, the fear that his career might end over someone else's incompetence. That's what good account managers do, Marcus. We solve problems, not create billable hours. Exactly. And when I started Chen Industries, I knew that someday I'd need partners who understood that philosophy. People who prioritize solutions over profits. He leaned forward, his expression growing serious. Sarah, I didn't just come to Meridian for software. I came because I wanted to work with you again. The contract specifically naming you as account manager wasn't standard boilerplate. It was intentional. The implications hit me like a revelation. Victoria never had a chance of keeping this deal. Victoria never understood that this deal was about relationships, not transactions. She spent this morning trying to sell me on Meridian's capabilities, but I already knew what you could deliver. I was evaluating whether the company deserved you, not the other way around. Our entrees arrived. Perfectly grilled salmon for me, the duck confit that Marcus always ordered when he was making important decisions. Jennifer refilled our water glasses with the kind of attentive service that comes from years of reading her customers' moods. So, what's the verdict? I asked. Does Meridian deserve me? Marcus smiled. That depends. Are you planning to stay? It was a fair question. After everything that had happened, Victoria's sabotage, Robert's betrayal of trust, the revelation that my own mentor had been willing to sacrifice me for corporate optics, why would I want to remain at Meridian? A week ago, I would have said yes without hesitation, I admitted. Meridian was my professional home. Robert was like a father figure. I believed in the company's mission and values. And now? Now I realize that loyalty is meaningless if it's not mutual. That mentorship without trust is just professional theater. That companies are only as good as the people who lead them. I looked out at the city spreading below us. Thousands of office buildings filled with people navigating their own corporate dramas, fighting their own battles against ambition and integrity. But I also realized that leaving doesn't solve the fundamental problem. If I walk away, Victoria wins. The company suffers. Good people lose their jobs because of one person's toxic ambition. Marcus nodded slowly. So you're staying to prove a point? I'm staying to prove that competence matters more than credentials. That relationships are built on trust, not manipulation. That sometimes the best revenge is simply being better at your job than the people trying to replace you. And if Robert disappoints you again? If another Victoria comes along? I thought about that for a moment, watching a plane trace across the sky far below us. Then I'll have options. Because after this week, I know exactly what I'm worth. And I know it's not determined by anyone else's recognition. Marcus raised his water glass. To knowing your worth. To finding people who recognize it, I countered. We clinked glasses, and I felt something shift in the dynamic between us. We were no longer just vendor and client navigating a business relationship. We were allies who understood what it meant to build something real in a world full of corporate theater. Speaking of recognition, Marcus said, pulling out his phone, I need to show you something. He scrolled to his LinkedIn feed and handed me the device. My breath caught. The post he'd written about me had been shared over 300 times. Comments from industry colleagues, former clients, even competitors who respected my work ethic. It was like watching my professional reputation crystallize in real time. Marcus, this is overdue, he finished. Sarah, you've been the secret weapon behind some of the best deals in Chicago tech. It's time people knew that. I scrolled through the comments, seeing names I recognized from years of networking events and project collaborations. People I'd helped, problems I'd solved, relationships I'd maintained even when it wasn't profitable. A career built on substance rather than style, finally getting the recognition it deserved. There's something else, Marcus continued. I've been thinking about expanding Chen Industries' consulting division. We need someone who understands both the technical and relationship sides of enterprise software. Someone who can build partnerships that outlast individual contracts. The offer hung in the air between us like an invitation to step through a door I'd never imagined existed. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership. Equity stake, full autonomy, the chance to build something from the ground up with people who share your values. I set down my fork, my appetite suddenly forgotten. 3 days ago, I'd been sitting in a windowless conference room having my career destroyed by someone who valued credentials over character. Now I was being offered the opportunity to co-create my professional future with someone who understood what real partnership looked like. What about the Meridian contract? We'll complete it as planned. You'll transition the relationship to someone at Meridian who can maintain the standards you've established. Then you'll join Chen Industries as VP of Strategic Partnerships, effective immediately after the transition. The Mont Blanc pen in my pocket seemed to pulse with warmth. The instrument that had signed hundreds of contracts for other people's companies was about to write the next chapter of my own story. Marcus, I need to ask, is this offer contingent on the Meridian deal closing successfully? No. This offer is based on 3 years of watching you turn impossible situations into successful partnerships. The Meridian contract is just business. This conversation is about the future. I looked out at the city one more time, thinking about Victoria sitting in some lawyer's office preparing to confess to federal crimes, about Robert struggling to rebuild trust he'd fractured through fear, about my colleagues who would continue fighting corporate battles in conference rooms that smelled like ambition and regret. Then I thought about building something new, something based on the values I'd spent 20 years trying to embody in environments that didn't always appreciate them. I accept, I said simply. Marcus smiled. Not the practiced expression of corporate politeness, but genuine joy. Welcome to Chen Industries, partner. We shook hands across the marble table. 35 floors above, a city full of people who were still learning the difference between success and significance. The view from up here was spectacular. 2 weeks later, I sat in my new office at Chen Industries, the Mont Blanc pen poised over my employment contract. The view wasn't as dramatic as the signature room, only the 15th floor. But it was mine. My nameplate read, Sarah Mitchell, VP Strategic Partnerships, and for the first time in my career, the title felt earned rather than assigned. The pen felt different in my hand now. Not the instrument of corporate servitude it had been for 8 years, but a tool of personal empowerment. Robert's retirement gift had become the key to my own future. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Board meeting in 10. Ready to present the Q4 partnership strategy? I smiled, capping the pen after signing my name with a flourish. Ready, I typed back. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 weeks ago, Victoria had tried to eliminate me to clear her path to success. Instead, she'd forced me to recognize my own worth and opened a door I'd never known existed. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well. A knock on my office door interrupted my thoughts. Jennifer, Robert's former assistant, now working for me, peeked in with a curious expression. Sarah, there's someone here to see you. Says she has something that belongs to you. My visitor was a woman in her 30s, professionally dressed but nervous. She introduced herself as Amy Patterson, former account manager at Hartwell & Associates. I know this is unusual, she began, settling into the chair across from my desk. But I heard about what happened with Victoria Ashworth at Meridian. When I saw your LinkedIn post about starting fresh at Chen Industries, I knew I had to reach out. She pulled a manila folder from her briefcase. These are copies of client files Victoria took when she left Hartwell. Detailed relationship maps, negotiation strategies, even personal notes about decision-makers' preferences. She'd been systematically cataloging this information for years. I opened the folder, my stomach dropping as I recognized the format. It was identical to my own client management system, the detailed files I'd built over years of relationship development. Victoria hadn't just been manipulating companies, she'd been stealing intellectual property. Amy, why are you showing me this? Because Victoria's been arrested. Federal wire fraud charges. And because her attorney is claiming that all these client insights were developed independently, not stolen from the companies she destroyed. The implications hit me immediately. She's trying to argue that she actually earned these relationships. Exactly. But I know better. And after watching what she tried to do to you, I realized that staying silent makes me complicit. Amy leaned forward, her voice growing stronger. The FBI needs testimony from people who can demonstrate Victoria's pattern of theft and manipulation, people who built real relationships that she tried to appropriate. I thought about Victoria in that lobby cafe, tears streaking her makeup as she confessed to a career built on deception. Part of me had felt pity for her then. Now, seeing evidence of the systematic way she'd stolen other people's work, that pity evaporated. "What do you need from me?" "Documentation of your own client relationship processes. Proof that what Victoria claimed as her innovation was actually standard industry practice, but only for people who actually do the work." I pulled out my laptop and opened my client management system. Years of detailed notes, relationship maps, communication preferences. The intellectual foundation that Victoria had tried to replicate through theft rather than earn through effort. "Amy, I'll testify. But not for revenge, for justice. What Victoria did wasn't just corporate politics. It was fraud, and it hurt real people." We spent the next hour documenting the parallels between Victoria's stolen files and legitimate relationship management practices. By the time Amy left, we had a compelling case that Victoria's innovations were actually plagiarized methodologies. That afternoon, I attended my first board meeting as VP of Strategic Partnerships. The Chen Industries conference room was smaller than Meridian's, but it felt more substantial somehow. Less corporate theater, more genuine collaboration. "Sarah," Marcus addressed me as the meeting concluded. "Before you go, there's something the board wants to discuss." He gestured toward the head of the table, where an older woman I didn't recognize was reviewing a stack of documents. "This is Margaret Chen, my aunt, and our chief financial officer. She has a proposal for you." Margaret looked up with sharp, intelligent eyes that reminded me of Marcus's analytical approach to business. "Ms. Mitchell, we've been impressed by your transition strategy for the Meridian account. The client satisfaction scores are exceptional, and the knowledge transfer process has been flawless." She slid a document across the table. "We'd like to formalize your equity partnership 6 months ahead of schedule." I picked up the papers, scanning the terms. Not just equity, significant equity. Enough to make me a true partner in building the company's future. "This is generous. This is strategic," Margaret corrected. "You've demonstrated that competence and integrity create sustainable value. We want to ensure you're properly invested in Chen Industries' long-term success." I pulled out the Mont Blanc pen, feeling its familiar weight. The same instrument that had signed my termination papers 3 weeks ago was about to formalize my transformation from employee to entrepreneur. But first, I had one more signature to complete. That evening, I returned to Meridian Solutions for the final time. Robert was waiting in his office, the same leather chair and mahogany desk where our professional relationship had both flourished and fractured. "The Chen transition is complete," I reported, settling into my old seat across from him. "Marcus is satisfied with the knowledge transfer, and the account remains secure." Robert nodded, but I could see the weight of recent events in his posture. He looked older, more fragile than the mentor who'd guided my early career. "Sarah, I know I have no right to ask this, but I need you to know something. Victoria's arrest has triggered a complete review of our hiring practices. The board has implemented new background check protocols, and we're restructuring the leadership evaluation process." "That's good to hear." "It's not enough," he continued. "I failed you. I let my own insecurities override 8 years of trust and partnership. There's no excuse for that." I studied his face, seeing genuine remorse alongside the professional contrition. "Robert, what happened taught me something important. Loyalty is valuable, but self-respect is essential. I can forgive your mistake, but I can't pretend it didn't happen. I understand, and I want you to know that your reputation at Meridian is secure. Any reference requests will reflect your true contributions to this company." I stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Robert, the best apology you can offer isn't to me. It's to the next talented person who walks through that door without Ivy League credentials. Trust your instincts about people. They're better than you think." Outside Meridian's building, I stood on the Chicago sidewalk where I'd walked thousands of times as an employee. The September evening was crisp with autumn promise. The city lights reflecting off windows that held other people's professional dreams and disappointments. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Corporate fraud investigation expands. Federal prosecutors target serial executive Victoria Ashworth. The article detailed charges spanning 4 companies and 6 years. Victoria's carefully constructed career was unraveling in federal court, her pattern of manipulation finally exposed to public scrutiny. I felt no satisfaction in her downfall, only relief that the pattern had been broken. How many other careers had she destroyed in her climb towards success that was never really hers? 3 months later, I received one final piece of correspondence related to the Victoria Ashworth saga. A handwritten letter postmarked from a federal minimum security facility in Pennsylvania. Sarah, I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted you to know that watching you these past months has shown me what I should have been building instead of what I was destroying. You found success by being genuinely competent, genuinely caring about your clients, genuinely worthy of the trust people placed in you. I tried to fake those qualities and lost everything in the process. I hope someday I can earn even a fraction of the respect you command naturally. Victoria. I read the letter twice, then filed it away. Not as vindication or closure, but as a reminder that character is the only credential that truly matters. That afternoon, I used the Mont Blanc pen to sign Chen Industries' largest contract to date, a partnership that would transform manufacturing software across 3 industries. The same pen that had once symbolized corporate servitude now represented the power to build something meaningful. As I capped the pen and set it aside, I realized that Victoria had been right about one thing. Credentials do matter in business, but the most important credentials aren't printed on diplomas or listed on resumes. They're earned through competence, proven through character, and validated by the trust of people who matter. And those credentials, once earned, can never be taken away. What would you have done in Sarah's position? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to check out the next story in the series.